From a wild parody to a black and white masterpiece, here are shocking facts you didn't know about Young Frankenstein. Young Frankenstein was never meant to be ordinary. Mel Brooks, the director and creative force behind the movie, wanted it to look and feel like the original Universal monster films from the 1930s. He didn't just want to parody Frankenstein, he wanted to resurrect it. And for him, that resurrection had to be in black and white.
Now, that brain that you gave me, was it Hans Delbrück's?
Back in the 1970s, black and white films were considered outdated. The industry had moved on. Audiences were used to big, colorful productions like Jaws, The Godfather, and Star Wars. But Brooks was stubborn. He believed that shooting Young Frankenstein in black and white was the only way to capture the mood, the texture, and the haunting gothic beauty of those old horror classics. He wanted every shadow, every flicker of lightning, and every close-up of the monster's face to look like it came straight out of the 1930s. The studio, however, didn't share his vision. When Brooks first presented the idea, they panicked. Executives told him no one in the modern age would pay to see a black and white comedy. To them, black and white meant old, boring, and unprofitable. They offered him more money and better marketing if he agreed to shoot in color. They even suggested making two versions, one in color for the main release and one in black and white as an artistic backup, but Brooks refused. He told them that if they forced him to shoot in color, he would walk away from the project completely. This led to days of heated back and forth arguments. Brooks tried to explain that the movie's soul depended on its black and white format. He wasn't chasing nostalgia for the sake of it. He was chasing authenticity. The contrast, the deep shadows, the play of light on the laboratory walls. Those things couldn't be faked. Eventually, the studio gave in, but only under one strange condition. Brooks wasn't allowed to mention anywhere in the advertising that the film was in black and white. They were terrified that audiences would reject it before even seeing it. Brooks agreed, but privately, he knew he'd won the battle that mattered. He shot the film exactly the way he imagined, using high contrast lighting and vintage cinematography techniques. When Young Frankenstein finally hit theaters, audiences didn't just see a parody, they saw a film that looked and felt like a lost relic from Hollywood's golden age of horror. What the studio thought was a commercial risk turned into the movie's greatest strength. It wasn't retro, it was rebellious.
Hans Delbrück's? No. Good.
But authenticity didn't stop with just the look of the film. When it came time to design the laboratory, the heart of Frankenstein's myth, Brooks and co-writer Gene Wilder wanted to make sure every detail felt genuine. They didn't want props that looked like props. They wanted real sparks, real coils, real science fiction magic. So they went on a hunt for the man who built the original Frankenstein lab equipment for the 1931 movie, Kenneth Strickfaden. Strickfaden was a special effects legend who had created the iconic Tesla coils, electrical arcs, and buzzing machinery that defined the visual language of classic horror. His work was so distinctive that it became a kind of cinematic signature. Every lab scene in every Frankenstein film that followed tried to imitate it. When Brooks and Wilder finally tracked him down, they discovered something astonishing. Strickfaden still had all the original equipment, every switchboard, every spark generator, every glowing tube, stored away in his garage, perfectly preserved. He agreed to lend his equipment to Young Frankenstein. For Brooks, it was like being handed a time machine. When the crew set up the lab scenes, they realized how perfectly everything fit. It wasn't imitation anymore. It was resurrection. The same machines that had once jolted Boris Karloff's monster to life were now lighting up Peter Boyle's version decades later. You could almost feel the history humming through the wires. Every arc of electricity, every metallic hum, was a direct link to the birth of cinematic horror itself. What made this even more incredible was how seamlessly Strickfaden's old machinery worked with modern filmmaking technology. Nothing needed to be rebuilt. It all still functioned, just as it had 40 years earlier. The actors were mesmerized. Gene Wilder reportedly said that walking onto the set felt like stepping back in time. The scene wasn't a parody anymore. It was a resurrection of everything that made the original Frankenstein legendary. And yet, even with this level of authenticity and passion, the studio still doubted the project. They didn't just question the black and white format, they questioned the title itself. Young Frankenstein sounded odd to them. It didn't sound like a blockbuster. It didn't sound funny. It didn't sound safe. Executives thought audiences wouldn't get it. To them, the title seemed too literary, too quiet, and not marketable enough for a big Hollywood comedy. At one point, they even proposed changing the name entirely. Some of their suggestions were downright ridiculous. Titles like Frankenstein Returns or Son of Frankenstein. The comedy. To Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks, that was the ultimate insult. They had spent months writing a story that was clever, ironic, and emotional. And now the studio wanted to flatten it into something generic. Wilder, usually calm and patient, lost his temper. He told Brooks that if they changed the title, he would quit. That moment changed everything. The studio backed down again. They didn't want to lose Wilder, and they didn't want to risk Brooks walking away a second time. So the title stayed, and with it, the entire personality of the film. It wasn't just a parody. It was something stranger, funnier, and far more human. The name Young Frankenstein perfectly captured that tone, a blend of gothic tragedy and absurd comedy. The cast of Young Frankenstein didn't just act out jokes, they lived them. Behind the camera, the film was as chaotic, hilarious, and unpredictable as the story it told. What Mel Brooks started as a structured, carefully crafted homage to classic horror soon turned into a playground of creative madness. The actors weren't just following a script, they were building comedy history. One take at a time, Mel Brooks was known for running a tight ship. He was intense, loud, and obsessed with getting every beat right. But on the set of Young Frankenstein, something magical and slightly rebellious started happening. Gene Wilder, Dr. Frederick Frankenstein,
Yes, I am Dr. Frederick Frankenstein, newly arrived from America.
and Marty Feldman, Igor, formed a mischievous duo. Between takes, they'd whisper to each other, tweak lines, and adjust timing without asking permission. Brooks would shout, "Stick to the script!" and they'd nod obediently, only to change it again the next moment. Their chemistry was undeniable. They understood each other's rhythms so well that their improvisations never felt forced. They made chaos look like choreography. One day, Marty Feldman walked onto set with a completely different accent from what he'd been using before, and he hadn't told anyone the cameras rolled. And everyone, including Brooks, burst out laughing. Brooks was furious at first. He thought Feldman was ruining the take, but when he saw the playback, he realized something. It worked. The unpredictability, the slight absurdity, it was exactly what made the film feel alive. From that day on, Brooks gave Feldman and Wilder more freedom to improvise, not because he liked losing control, but because he finally understood that this was the control, letting real creativity breathe on its own, and no one embodied that creative spirit better than Marty Feldman. His portrayal of Igor, or Igor, as he insists, became one of the most beloved characters in comedy history. But one of his best jokes wasn't in the script at all. It was hidden in plain sight. Throughout the movie, Igor's hump keeps changing sides. Sometimes it's on the right shoulder, sometimes on the left, and sometimes it disappears completely. The makeup department didn't notice at first, and neither did Brooks. It wasn't a mistake, it was a prank. Feldman had decided, entirely on his own, to move the hump each day just to see how long it would take someone to notice. When Brooks finally did, he didn't yell, he laughed. He told the editors to leave it exactly as it was. The result was one of the film's most subtle, enduring jokes, a silent visual gag that perfectly captured the absurd energy of Young Frankenstein. It's never mentioned, never explained, and that's what makes it so brilliant. Feldman didn't need dialogue to make people laugh. He used details, movement, and unpredictability. That small decision became a piece of cinematic legend. While Feldman was busy making the crew laugh, Peter Boyle, who played the monster, was suffering for the art in a very different way. His transformation took hours every day. The makeup team layered his face with prosthetics, latex, and glue. Under the bright studio lights, the makeup became torture. It trapped heat against his skin until it started melting and sliding off. His scars would droop, his forehead bubbled, and his fake bolts would shift out of place. The crew had to stop filming multiple times to reapply everything from scratch. Despite the discomfort, Boyle never complained. He powered through scene after scene, sweating, stumbling, and still managing to deliver one of the most endearing monsters ever captured on film. The image of him in a tuxedo, dancing awkwardly to "Puttin' on the Ritz" is now iconic. What most people don't know is that Boyle was burning up under those layers of latex the entire time, but he never broke character. Somehow, that real pain gave his performance a strange humanity. The monster wasn't just funny, he was oddly moving. Another unforgettable presence on set was Cloris Leachman, who played Frau Blücher, the mysterious housekeeper whose very name sends horses into a frenzy. While everyone else leaned into outrageous humor, Leachman went in the opposite direction. She played her role with chilling precision, quiet, deliberate, and eerily calm. Her clipped accent was impossible to place, part Transylvanian, part something else entirely. She didn't chase laughs, but every time she opened her mouth, the cast fell apart. Gene Wilder would start giggling mid-line. Terry Garr, Inga, would turn away to hide her laughter. Even the camera crew couldn't hold it together. No one could keep a straight face around Leachman. Brooks eventually made a bold decision. Instead of asking her to tone it down, he let her stay exactly as she was and edited around the laughter. What audiences saw on screen was the strangest kind of comedy. A character who wasn't trying to be funny at all, yet somehow stole every scene she was in. Leachman turned restraint into chaos, a performance so unsettling it became hypnotic. Terry Garr's journey to the film was equally unexpected. She wasn't the studio's first choice to play Inga. Producers initially wanted someone more traditionally glamorous, an actress who could bring a sense of serious beauty to balance the film's weirdness. But creative tensions behind the scenes opened the door for Garr, and it was Gene Wilder who quietly recommended her. When she walked into her first read-through, she didn't act like she was in a comedy. She played her lines with sincerity, warmth, and a hint of playfulness. Mel Brooks watched her for a few minutes in silence, then smiled. He didn't need to see anyone else. She wasn't trying to act funny, she was funny because she was natural. Garr brought a sweetness to the film that grounded the madness around her.
Dr. Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
You're putting me on.
Then there was Gene Hackman, the Oscar-winning dramatic actor known for The French Connection and The Conversation. No one expected to see him in a Mel Brooks comedy. His cameo as the blind hermit happened almost by accident. He'd met Gene Wilder on a tennis court one afternoon and told him he wanted to try comedy, just once. Wilder came up with a small but unforgettable part, a lonely blind man who befriends the monster and accidentally burns his hand, spills soup on him, and smashes everything in sight. Hackman filmed the entire sequence in a single day. His performance, played with complete sincerity, was so unexpected and so bizarre that it became one of the funniest cameos in movie history. Even Mel Brooks himself had to restrain his usual instincts. In his earlier films like Blazing Saddles and The Producers, he'd appear on screen in multiple roles. He loved cameos, but this time, Gene Wilder told him no. If Mel appeared in costume, even for a second, it would break the illusion. Young Frankenstein needed to feel like a real 1930s horror film, not a modern parody winking at the audience. Brooks reluctantly agreed, but he couldn't resist sneaking himself in somewhere. His voice can be heard throughout the film, as a howling wolf, a screeching cat, even the distant whistle of a train. He might not be visible, but his presence lingers in every sound, every spark, every laugh. For a film filled with monsters, lightning, and mad science, Young Frankenstein hides some of its best shocks in the smallest moments, beneath the thunder and slapstick. The movie's greatest magic lies in its subtle gags, its unexpected musical numbers, and the strange little decisions that turned ordinary scenes into immortal comedy. Every joke had a heartbeat, and every beat carried the spark of pure invention. One of the most legendary moments in the film almost didn't happen at all: the "puttin' on the Ritz" scene. Today, it's one of the most famous sequences in movie history, but during production, Mel Brooks wanted to cut it entirely. He thought it was too weird, too long, and too far from the tone of the film. "This isn't Blazing Saddles," he reportedly told Gene Wilder. "We're not doing vaudeville here," but Wilder refused to back down. He believed that the scene where Dr. Frankenstein and his monster perform a tap dance routine to Irving Berlin's Puttin' on the Ritz was the soul of the movie, the moment where horror, absurdity, and emotion all collided. Brooks finally gave in, and the cast rehearsed for days. Peter Boyle, trapped inside layers of makeup and prosthetics, struggled to dance in his heavy monster costume. His oversized boots threw off his balance, and the thick latex on his face made it hard to breathe. But somehow the awkwardness worked. It made the performance funnier, more human, when the cameras rolled and Boyle's gravelly voice croaked, "Puttin' on the Ritz!" Audiences roared with laughter. Brooks admitted later that Wilder was right. The scene didn't just belong in the movie, it defined it. What began as a creative argument became one of the most iconic musical moments in film history. That same instinct for humor in the unexpected carried through the entire movie. Take, for instance, the famous "walk this way" joke.
Walk this way. This way.
It's simple, quick, and unforgettable. When Igor tells Dr. Frankenstein, "walk this way," the doctor imitates his limp, hobbling after him like a shadow. The gag lasts just a few seconds, but it's one of the film's biggest laughs. It became so memorable that years later, people claimed it inspired Aerosmith's hit song, "Walk This Way." The band has never officially confirmed it, but the timing fits. The movie came out in 1974, and the song appeared a year later. Whether or not the story is true, the idea that a single throwaway joke could ripple through rock history feels perfectly fitting for a film built on wild coincidences and strange magic. Another piece of behind-the-scenes genius was the film's dedication to practical effects. Young Frankenstein didn't rely on digital tricks or sound libraries because they didn't exist yet. Everything you see and hear on screen was built, rigged, or recorded in real life. When Mel Brooks wanted a thunderstorm, the crew had to make one. They built wind machines, set up rain pipes, and flashed lights in rhythm with the thunder cues. During one chaotic night of shooting, the storm got a little too real. The pressure from the rain rigs broke containment, flooding the entire laboratory set. Electrical cables shorted out, and water pooled up to the actors' ankles. For a moment, they thought they might have to shut down production for days, but the crew worked overnight, dried the entire set, and filmed again the very next morning, as if nothing had happened. When you watch the storm scene in the final film, what you're seeing isn't movie magic. It's real chaos, controlled just enough to make it look cinematic. One of the film's strangest and most beloved running gags came from a single name, Frau Blücher. Every time her name is mentioned, horses off-screen neigh and scream in terror. It's such a ridiculous idea that audiences can't help but laugh, even though it's never explained. The best part? The gag wasn't random. Mel Brooks later revealed that it came from a real memory. As a kid, he'd known a woman who terrified him. Cold, harsh, and sharp-tongued. When he and Gene Wilder wrote the character, he imagined that same woman's energy, and the hoarse shrieks became a symbol of her menace.
I am Frau Blücher.
In the movie, it works as both a punchline and a mood setter. It's silly, but it also adds an odd layer of darkness. Every time the horses scream, it reminds the audience that something about this world is just a little bit off. That balance between fear and absurdity is what makes Young Frankenstein timeless. Mel Brooks' attention to detail extended even to the sound effects. Because he couldn't use modern libraries or pre-recorded tracks, many of the film's noises were made manually. Brooks himself provided several of them. His voice can be heard howling like a wolf, screeching like a cat, and even imitating the distant whistle of a train. These sounds were small touches, but they gave the film a handmade feel, as if every laugh and every scare had been crafted by human hands. It's this craftsmanship, equal parts precision and chaos, that makes the movie still feel alive today.
No, it's pronounced Frankenstein.
Do you also say Froderick?
No, Frederick.
Even the dialogue carried layers of hidden humor. The line that nearly cost Young Frankenstein its PG rating was one no one expected to cause trouble. Toward the end of the movie, when the monster is preparing to consummate his relationship with Elizabeth, played by Madeline Kahn, she gasps dramatically, Oh, the sweet mystery of life, at last I've found you. It's absurd, melodramatic, and intentionally over the top, a callback to the romantic songs of old Hollywood. But when the ratings board reviewed the scene, they flagged it as sexually suggestive in an unnatural context. Brooks was floored. He argued that the entire point of the line was parody, not passion. It took several rounds of back and forth discussions before the board relented and allowed the film to keep its PG rating. One line, one joke almost pushed the entire film into R-rated territory.